Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Dene filmmaker Kelvin Redvers. His first feature film, the thriller Cold Road, starring Roseanne Superno, is about an Indigenous woman and her dog being hunted by a stranger in a semi-truck on an isolated highway in the north. Redvers has worked in film and media for more than 20 years. In 2016, he also co-founded We Matter, a national campaign supporting youth with mental health. His work on the campaign earned him the Meritorious Service Medal, one of the highest civilian honors for any Canadian. Kelvin, thanks so much for being with us this week from our Vancouver studio.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me.
And congrats on the film. Obviously, let's start with Cold Road. As we mentioned, an Indigenous woman and her dog on the vast, barren northern highways. She's heading home to be with her dying mom. How would you describe the film?
This film is a thriller through and through. When I grew up, I would go visit some of my Dene aunties, and on the shelves of covering the entire home, there would be VHS tapes of like pulpy thrillers from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And, you know, it always felt that like us as Indigenous folks that, you know, we never got to be in those types of movies. And that was the goal, was to make a thriller that could feel like those kind of pulpy thrillers that, you know, those classic movie thrillers that you like. But, you know, it's the modern day, and so we want to put these types of movies in the modern context of what it is that people like us, what Indigenous folks face. We shot it in the Northwest Territories, and I believe this is one of the most nail-biting, exciting, most meaningful movies that you could find out there right now.
Well, I was lucky enough to be able to watch it yesterday, so, you know, it really took me back to the film Duel. For some reason, I remember that film from when I was a kid and saw it on TV, one of Spielberg's first films. What were some of the other inspirations for you this time around for this film?
Yeah, Duel was absolutely one of the inspirations. I think the biggest inspiration for what this movie is actually just where I grew up. So I grew up in Hay River in the Northwest Territories. I'm a member of the Dene First Nation, and I grew up, I think as a lot of us know what it's like to kind of drive on these northern highways in Canada, where, you know, at least if you want to drive to the next town for a hockey tournament or whatever, it might take, you know, 3 hours, it might take 5 hours to get to where you're going to go, at least where I grew up. And having spent my whole life on those highways in the wintertime when it's minus 20, if something goes wrong, like actually goes wrong, like, you know, these are actual dangerous situations. And I've been on those types of highways. I have flipped a truck once on the highway between Hay River to Fort Simpson in the Northwest Territories. And, you know, there's just a vibe and a feeling, I think, to those sorts of places. I think we all know the feeling of being out at night in the wintertime on a highway like this, and that kind of chill that you have go up your back. I would say that's the biggest inspiration for what this movie is. But also a movie like Duel, or like a movie like Blood Simple, which is like a Coen Brothers movie from the 80s, or, you know, just those kind of pulpy, old-fashioned thrillers. Like, I think a lot of times these days it feels like, you know, movies are very sort of CG heavy. They might not feel very real. So we were trying to make a movie that is so authentic to the North. It's so authentic to the types of experiences that, you know, an Indigenous woman might face on these highways, and sort of putting all those pieces together, taking, you know, the real life experiences of Northerners, taking the tropes, the genre of the Hollywood thriller, and kind of mashing them up together into something that can be like exciting, that can be thrilling, that can be nail-biting, and also just like meaningful to like the modern experience of, you know, us as Indigenous folks.
I still have a VHS copy of Blood Simple in a box in my basement right now, although I don't even have a VHS player, so I can't even watch it. Yeah, you know, as a younger journalist, I drove the roads of Northern Ontario by myself every week, and there were points in this movie I was like, oh, that looks almost exactly like Northern Ontario, where you wouldn't see anybody for like 45 minutes on the road. I guess one of the major differences with those tropes, with like a film like Duel, is that this is an Indigenous woman, and the things that she encounters, others wouldn't, right? Like with the treatment that she receives from police.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of thing where like, I feel like, I haven't seen myself on Hollywood screens for most of my life. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of us. And, I think that's a problem. I think we want to get more Indigenous stories. And I think that like, I think we can all imagine in our heads when we think of what that classic thriller is, and especially like, that sort of classic story of like a hero up against a villain, or like, an antagonist up against a protagonist. And I definitely really wanted to make that type of movie where it's just like there's a good person and there's a bad person, and they bump up against each other, and the main character goes through like the worst of situations. Now, as soon as you do that with an Indigenous character, with a female Indigenous character, it's like right away, there's no way to avoid the types of things that I think we all are aware of, the sorts of stuff that happen like, in real life, whether it be the Highway of Tears, whether it be, issues like Starlight Tours. And so it was a delicate balance to try to put this movie together in a way where it can feel like the hero's journey, where it can feel like that classic movie, a movie of like, wow, our hero is up against everything and they're going to get knocked down and they're going to get back up, while also mixing in enough of those elements that it can feel real, but not also feel too like depressing or too kind of overwhelmingly heavy. So that was like the balance that we were trying to do. And I think that this movie kind of pulls those things off, that if you can watch it, it does feel real. And there are going to be a lot of folks who, get that emotional feeling of, wow, this is really familiar. But we wanted to do that in a way where this is a movie. It's going to lead towards, the way I think people would want a movie to end, I guess is maybe the way that I would say it. And so hopefully all of those experiences and all those types of things that can feel really real and current, that it can also just be the experience of, watching someone overcome all of this and kind of becoming, I think Roseanne, the way she described thinking of her character as a woman refinding her spirit. And so that's what I think that the movie is as well too, of like, is that this Tracy, the lead character, is going to go through hell, but she's going to come out the other side. And I think everybody who watches it is going to feel that like emotional release of, watching someone become a hero.
Like, it's, hey, one of the other things that I was felt familiar to me as well was like her character hadn't been home in a long time, right? Like, just didn't go back home. Aside from like the setting in the north where you grew up and the car crash that you mentioned you had yourself, were there other things that you took from your own life for the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the Northwest Territories, and then at 18 I moved to Vancouver to be a filmmaker, and that was 17 years ago, 18, 20, so that's some amount of time. And I, when I left Northwest Territories, I was 18 and I was like, I don't ever want to go home. My home is dumb, it's stupid. I don't like, I just didn't have the pride of being proud of like who I am and where I came from. But as you get older, or as I got older anyways, like I started to like, that changed, like I started to feel more of that connection to home. Like I started to feel and realize how actually where I'm from and who I am being Dene is a part of me. Like it's a strength of who I am. And so in this story, that's very much what happens with Tracy. She's sort of going through that experience, in a condensed timeline where she hasn't been home in 8 years. Her mom has had a stroke. She's trying to get home desperately to see her mom before her mom passes away. And she's going through that guilt of like not having been home in so long. But slowly through this, riveting story of this trucker, like, trying to kill her, she's also rediscovering her own strength of like who she is and where she comes from and why she has this strength. And so, yes, absolutely. That story of Indigenous person learning to love who they are and where they come from is very much something that I've gone through myself, on top of this like, thriller of this, woman literally just trying to survive from this stranger in a semi-truck who is like pretty actively hunting her down. And like, we have some pretty exciting scenes, I think, in the movie of like actual action scenes that we shot in the Northwest Territories, we smashed cars and trucks together, and I think made some pretty exciting cinema for people to go find in this movie.
Absolutely, and I want to ask you about some of those things that you filmed, but we're just going to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here with Kelvin Redvers on Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is filmmaker Kelvin Redvers. Kelvin, we're talking about your film Cold Road, which is out now, and we're starting to talk about filming this, the actual filming of it, on location in the north, in the cold, real stunts. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced with all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like film audiences can kind of tell, when like a movie is real or if they're just shooting, like everything in a studio and it's all CG or whatever. Well, this is a smaller movie, so it would have been hard to afford lots of like CG stuff. But this is a movie about an Indigenous woman driving home on a quiet highway in the north while a semi-truck is following her. And so for it to feel accurate, we did all of those things. So we shot this movie on the highway in between my hometown and my First Nation, probably the highway I've driven the most in my life. And we brought up a car, a stunt driver, a truck stunt driver, a stunt coordinator, and a car that has a camera on it with a crane. And so we did genuine stunts on the highways of Northwest Territories where we were like smashing a car and a truck together. We had a car spin out and slam into a snowbank. We had a truck do a jackknife. And we did all of those things while it was like, minus 15 in the remoteness of Northwest Territories. And the reason that we did all those things was because I feel like it just makes the movie better. Like if you actually, like when you watch, if anybody watches the trailer, which I highly recommend, just like if you just Google Cold Road trailer, you'll see some of the best stunts that we did in this movie.
As we mentioned, Roseanne Superno stars in the film, really stars in the film. Boy, she's been busy lately, but it's got an all-Indigenous cast. Can you talk about the importance of that for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's great about Rose is she, I grew up in the Northwest Territories, and Rose grew up in northern Alberta, and so she got it right away in terms of like what this movie was and why it was that we were making it. And it's a ton of pressure on Roseanne. If anybody knows, she's in Acting Good. She's been in a bunch of feature films over the years, and just an incredible Indigenous actress. And the whole movie is like her, right? It's like right on her face, basically, for like 80% of this movie, and she carries this like powerful emotional journey of someone who's feeling sad and feeling guilty about not being home for so long, and being kind of a pushover to facing like genuine, death-defying moments throughout the movie, and then slowly becoming an absolute badass. And so she carries off all of those moments just perfectly. Her co-star is Taylor Kinnaquan, who's this phenomenal actress who probably people haven't seen yet, but you're going to see a lot more of her because she's incredibly just so talented. She's the sister who's back at home. And yeah, just having those Indigenous faces on screen makes a huge difference. But the other co-star of the movie is a dog named Caribou, who plays Pretzel in the movie. And Pretzel, this dog, is Tracy's confidant throughout the whole movie. So it's like her and a dog like driving in a car. And the dog is there to kind of provide emotional support. And that dog is actually my sister's dog. So there's this whole kind of, entirely northern cast, of whether it be Rose from the north, Taylor from Saskatchewan, or the dog that's from the Yukon. Yeah.
Well, the film's been playing in select theaters. What's been the reaction, and how can people that don't have these theaters around them, how can they watch?
Yeah. So it's really difficult often to promote Canadian movies, in this country. But what this film did is it blew everybody's expectations. So normally movies will play like, they might play Toronto or Vancouver for a week, then they'll kind of vanish. Whereas Cold Road started playing in like Yellowknife, in Hay River, in Red Deer, in Lethbridge, and then it did well, and then word spread, and then it started playing all of these theaters everywhere else. So it would play like North Battleford, Saskatchewan, or like Wetaskiwin. And Cold Road was beating Hollywood movies at these little theaters all over the country. And I think the reason is because it's like all of us as rural or indigenous northern folks are like, oh my God, we haven't seen movies like this with us. And so they would show up, and we sold out like North Battleford 4 nights in a row when the movie came out, or like High Prairie or all these places. And the movie, I think it's surpassed something like 75 or 80% of all Canadian movies at the box office. And I think it's partly just because of that audience excitement over what this movie is. As of right now, everybody watching can go online and you can find Cold Road to rent or to purchase on Apple TV, on iTunes, on Amazon, on YouTube, all the cable providers. And I really hope that people do, because the only way that you get more Indigenous cinema, the only way we get more Cold Roads is that if they are financially successful. And I think, wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where there was 3 or 4 or 5 Indigenous movies that came out every year that you could go see in theaters that reflected who we are? And that just isn't the case. And the only way to get there is if everybody watching right now goes and rents Cold Road for $5. That's all it costs. Or to, you can buy it for $10. Watch it, tell your friends about it. We need tens of thousands of people, or like, if not hundreds of thousands of people, to prove that these types of movies should get made more. And that's our goal, with this movie. And so hopefully everybody can I get on board with that? Yeah, what, right now, you can just pull out your phone, pull up iTunes and pay $5 for Cold Road. And that's the path to getting more of those. And hopefully people really like the movie as well too. So, you can tell your friends, you can let people know like, hey, this is a movie worth watching. This is worth your $5. And yeah, if 100,000 people rent this movie or buy it, that's how we get more of these. That's how you tell more stories with, Indigenous leads and from the North and that kind of thing. And so I really desperately just want so many people to get on board with like, hey, yeah, you know what? Let's have more of these.
Well, on that theme, like we said, you've been in the industry about 20 years almost now. This is your first feature film. Was that by design or just changes in the industry itself?
If I had the choice, I would have been making movies 10, 15 years ago. But they're expensive, Yeah. It takes a Herculean effort to get these off the ground. And even this one I've been working on for I think 4, maybe 5 years in order to get it going. And if you just think about some of the other amazing movies that have come out, like from other Indigenous filmmakers, like Dene or the Marie Clements, like it takes all of us 3, 4, 5, maybe more years to get to making one of these. And I've been in rooms with industry distributors, like with people who make movies, and they'll just look me in the eye and say, movies like this aren't successful, or like that Indigenous stories aren't financially viable, so we aren't going to make your movie. And it's frustrating. And I think that we would all like to get past that. And the only way is to actually move the needle of people, like lots of people watching them and making these movies, successful.
Kelvin, want to definitely touch on moving that needle. We do just have to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with filmmaker Kelvin Redvers. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Dene filmmaker Kelvin Redvers, and we've been talking about Cold Road, his first feature film that is now available for all to see, and the fact that Kelvin has 2 decades in this industry. There was a time, Kelvin, when we would only see maybe one Indigenous-led film a year, and it was based on a Joseph Boyden book. And although Through Black Spruces, I still watch that every time it comes on. But what changes have you seen in the industry in that 20 years, if any, and what do you think could push this industry forward again?
Yeah, it's slowly, even before you'd have non-Indigenous actors play Indigenous roles, slowly we're getting out of that. But then you would have, non-Indigenous writers, or not even based on books, but it's there's steps. So it's now we have more Indigenous actual actors playing Indigenous roles. We have more stories from Indigenous novels, from writers. Now it's getting to more Indigenous writers and directors. I think the next big step is going to be producers and sort of the production companies. So it's like led from the start. And if it does well, that it, it helps support Indigenous producers as well. And I think that we're getting there. It's just, it's a long, high climb to get there. But I think we're making headway.
Part of that climb, and I know we're short on time, but can we talk briefly about what happened to you at Cannes a little less than 2 years ago? This, of course, is viewed by many as the premier film festival. You're over there as part of a delegation of Indigenous filmmakers. A big moment. Can you just briefly tell us what happened and the outcome of that?
Yeah, so you have to wear formal wear on the Cannes red carpet, and so that usually means tux, bow tie. But they make exceptions for different cultures. So like a person in a kilt could walk the red carpet, or if they're Scottish, they could wear a kilt, or an Indian could wear a sari. So in that vein, I went in my Dene moccasins, which would be the type of thing that people get married in. Every big event, you wear your moccasins, and they saw my moccasins and they were like, "Get the F out!"
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, you can't use these. And so I got kicked off of the red carpet for wearing my Indigenous moccasins, which really sucked. But it actually created this media firestorm. And so in the week after that had happened, there was like 600 articles from around the world. It was a story in Variety, in the Hollywood Reporter, in Vogue. And I hope it opened a conversation about more acceptance of Indigenous people and our culture in these media spaces that we haven't been a part of for so long.
Which I think probably did. I mean, when you look at the following year at Cannes, when you have Flowers of the Killer Moon coming and all that went on with that. Kelvin, really short on time, but what more do you think can be done to help Indigenous filmmakers right now?
I feel like it's $5. It's $10. It's lots of audiences showing up for these types of movies. I think that's the biggest thing, is that distributors, sales agents, like even movie actors, like they'll pay attention when Indigenous films are financially successful. Like it costs millions of dollars to make movies, and so movies should be able to make millions of dollars in order for them to keep going. And so it feels small, but like it's like finding ways just to put $10, to the fact of like watching a movie. Hey Victor is another Indigenous movie coming out soon. If it's in a theater, go to the theater, pay $12, go watch it. Rent Cold Road, rent Hey Victor, find these other Indigenous movies and tell your friends about them. Because I think that if we can make that buzz, if you can get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people watching these movies, then we will get more of them. And I think that the industry will listen to you. It'll listen to audiences. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to get. Cold Road to be the #1 film online in Canada. And we kind of need literally everybody to rent it right now on Apple or YouTube.
Got to say, I'm also really excited for Hey Victor. Kelvin, we didn't even get to talk about the We Matter campaign. I think we'll have to have you back on the show sometime in the future. But best of luck to you on getting everybody in the country to watch Cold Road, and all the best with this film and your next projects. Appreciate you taking the time for us this week.
Oh yeah, it is an exciting thriller, nail biter, and I hope everybody gets to check it out. Watch the trailer. It's a great ride. Buckle up. Thanks so much for having me.
That is all the time we have this week. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us here on Face to Face. We'll see you back here in 7 days.